Many designers are struggling because what is ethical? And the reason that they're struggling is they've got a strong sense of what is right and wrong with design. Like they've got a strong sense of a dark pattern is not good, but you can't push back against a request for a dark pattern just because your gut tells you it's wrong.
In today's podcast, I talk with Lisa Woodley, a design leader and a highly recognized advocate for design ethics. In a resistance toolkit on her website, lisawoodley.com, she outlines strategies to help designers navigate the ethical challenges of working in the design industry. Lisa Woodley, welcome to the show. Can you first explain the difference between morals and ethics?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of philosophers and educators and people that always talk about this, and there's a lot of different interpretations of this depending on who you talk to. But there's really sort of a basic at the bottom, which is if you look, you can think of ethics as shared rules of conduct within a culture or a profession. So like, for example, medical code of ethics. And so if you think about ethics typically, in the strict definition of the word, require sort of applying, and I'll talk about it, morals broadly to a society. So morals, so ethics are those rules that we sort of set to follow. Morals are more personal principles. So it's your own internal sense of right and wrong. The reason the two of them become so inextricably intertwined is because morals also come from society in many ways, but it's more they come from the society that you've been raised in, right? So the society that you interact with, what you've been raised, you've been shaped by your environment. But at the end of the day, you could be transported to any environment and you will carry that moral code that you have internally with you. And then what you have to do is occasionally the moral code may come into conflict with the ethical codes that are happening around you. So it's really thinking about that difference. Where it gets very interesting in design, if to talk specifically about design, is there are no ethical standards. Like there's no governing body that says designers need to do this. The field is still forming. And so designers are working without ethical rules. So and that's part of what prompted me to really start talking about this, is if you analyze that difference between ethics and morals, the ethics aren't there now in the definition, in the strict definition sense of the word.
That actually is a nice segue into the next question, Lisa. So we often assume that every UX professional practices ethical design. UX professionals, they are empathetic towards users, they listen to their needs, and they develop thoughtful solutions. But what does it mean to truly practice ethical design? And what are the common misunderstandings designers have about ethical design?
Yeah, and so the common misunderstanding they have goes back to the difference between ethics and morals and where the design community is today. Because, and I write about ethical design, but right now ethical design is this cloudy shared understanding that we have, but there's so many gray areas that many designers are struggling because what is ethical? And the reason that they're struggling is they've got a strong sense of what is right and wrong with design. Like they've got a strong sense of a dark pattern is not good, but you can't push back against a request for a dark pattern just because your gut tells you it's wrong. Right, and that is what prompted me to start writing the Designer Resistant Toolkit series that I have on Medium, is because I recognize talking to designers that they've got a moral compass. They understand when something's wrong, but because there are no formal rules out there right now, although that is changing, but right now there's no formal rules, I wanted to start to contribute to that conversation of what is the ethical framework for design.
I also would like to talk about moral responsibility. Because if such a rule book were to exist, could ethical design operate without individual moral responsibility?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, and this gets so fascinating because if you step outside of design, and this is the debate that philosophers have of what would the world be like if we didn't have laws? Like, are people, am I not robbing from my neighbor because it's wrong or because it's illegal? And you're going to get different answers from different people, right? I would like to think I'm not going to do it because it's wrong. And yet we still need laws in place. And I say that because I would wager that the designers listening to your podcast have a very strong moral compass and probably don't need rules in order to follow that. But we are already seeing right now that there are plenty of designers out there who are okay with, I don't want to say that, whose moral compass is very different from ours. Let me word it that way. I started to get judgy, and I don't want to judge someone. And so I would say to your listeners, like, fight the good fight. I'm sure if they're listening to you, they are already thinking about humans. And I would also hope that a really good designer is already thinking about what is good for humans. But I also know when I go out there and talk to people, not everybody has that same sense of moral responsibility for the humans we're designing for that I do. And I actually, after a conference where I had talked about ethics, got into quite a heated debate with a designer who came up to me and was like, our responsibility is to fulfill the brief that the client gives us. That's our responsibility. And our responsibility, the client gives us the brief and it's to sell more things, if it's to get more clicks, that's our responsibility. And
what was your reaction?
I was dumbfounded for a moment because I said, do you really believe that you do not have a responsibility to humanity?
And what was the reaction?
His reaction was no. It is, and do you know why he said that? He wasn't like some evil, nefarious person. It was, I'm just one person, right? I've got a job to do. I'm one person doing a job. What I do, I think in his mind, he wasn't really thinking about how what he does impacts humanity. I think that was the crux of it. I don't think it was that he didn't care about humanity. We all live on the same planet. We have to. It's that he didn't connect what he was doing with the good of humanity.
So another question that I have is, and that is something that you already explained a little bit. What happens when you find yourself in a community that doesn't share your values, or only maybe share a few?
That exact question is what led me to write that designer's resistant toolkit, because it's very challenging. Because if you think about it, even in great companies where you're completely aligned, there are going to be moments of ethical gray areas where what you think is right and what they think is right is not going to align. So many of us in tech industry, one of those gray areas that's coming up right now is building AI and chatbots with the idea of intimacy. So building AI and chatbots with the idea of customer intimacy. And what that means is you're trying to create an emotional connection between a chatbot and a human, which maybe even a year ago, a lot of people would have been like, no big deal. But now we're seeing it's a big deal. We are seeing severe psychological impacts because people are becoming emotionally closer to a bot than to their family and their friends, and that leads to just terrible. It's killing people. It's leading to really bad consequences. So you could be in a good organization, but they may also come and say, okay, we want this chatbot to feel more emotional. We want them to feel closer, and that's a gray area because it's not inherently bad for you to feel like you're chatting with a human when you're chatting with a chatbot, but you have to draw a line somewhere. of, what is that relationship? How do we keep that relationship from going too far? So even when you're in a good company, you are going to come upon these moments where somebody thinks that that is perfectly okay, and you think it's completely wrong. And the thing that you have to do when you confront those, and I'll talk in a minute about if you're in a company that's just completely misaligned, because that's a whole nother thing. But if you're in a company where it's like every once in a while something crops up, the first thing I had to learn was to check my own bias. Meaning I had to step back and say to myself, is that ethically wrong by my code of ethics or my morality? Or do I just disagree with it? Right? That was the first thing, because sometimes it's something where it's like, I don't love it. So there's the stupid things like if you hurry up and ask for somebody's email right away as soon as they come onto a site. Well, to me, you're asking for something without giving something in return, and I don't like that. I really think it needs to be a mutual value exchange. That's not a huge deal though. So when I hit that, I'm just going to be like, okay, I don't quite think that's right. There can be a little bit of a negotiation. When it comes to the bigger things in that company, it could still be a negotiation when you're in that kind of company, but you have to check your bias first. You have to confirm, like, I'm not saying no to this because I don't like it. Like, I'm saying no because if I step outside of my own moral compass, it's still wrong. And when I step outside of my moral compass, I would like to think, unless, you're a certain segment of the criminal society, I would like to think that one of the basic things is you don't want to hurt other people. Right? Like that, most people have that that's more baked in from like an evolutionary perspective and not from a societal perspective. So you look at those things and use that as your foundation. And then if you're like, okay, no, this is crossing too far into that line of harming somebody, you have to collaborate. Now, you have to collaborate, you have to talk, you have to explain. And I write the tools in the toolkit for how do you do that. You reframe the ask, you pull data to show what the actual damage might be. Now, if you're in a company where what you believe is right is just completely misaligned, and I mean, I'll if you work for X, if you work for Meta, even OpenAI they're like right they're right on that line right now. They're right on that line. But if you look at companies like Meta, which really have kind of shown that they want clicks and they want engagements and the consequences don't really matter to them, it's fun. I would say get out, but here's what I understand, and this is what led me to writing the last tool that I wrote about, an exit. Like, you can't stay in a company like that. If your morals are being challenged every single day, it is going to take a toll on your mental health that you are never going to get back. And there is nothing more important than your mental health. Having said that, the job market right now for designers is not good. And so I don't want to be one of those people that's like, oh, don't, just walk away and you'll, when I did that, and I tell the story of when I did that, it was in 2005. Totally different job market. The dot-com bubble had burst, people were coming, but everything was coming back, right? Now, what you have to do is plan your exit. And that is twofold. So one, it is don't think of yourself as I'm trapped in this job. Think, okay, I'm in this job now, the market's bad. Start planning your exit. I won't go into a ton of detail here. I'd love it if people would read the Tool 10 in the Designer's Resistant Toolkit, because that talks about that. But the important thing there is you need to start to separate yourself from that kind of job. Even if you have to still work there, you then have to start emotionally separating yourself from that kind of job. Because if you work at that company, you are not going, if you work at Meta, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to go ahead and call it out, you're not going to change the company's mind about responsible use of data and not addicting people to via dark patterns. Like, you're just not going to change the company's mind. That's their business model. They've got a difference of opinion than you do, and it is going to take a massive toll. So I would say if you're at a company where it's coming up every now and then, that is where you step back, you negotiate the conversation, you talk about what a better way might be to do it. But if you're at a company where it's the business model that you're at odds with, it's going to be really hard to survive there and keep yourself intact.
So for many designers, it's difficult to anticipate unintended harm.
Yes.
I mean, the history of technology shows that things are being developed with the best intentions, and then later on it turns out to be terrible. But why do you think predicting negative outcomes is so difficult? Is it a lack of understanding, or is it ignorance? Is it maybe something else?
I mean, there's a few things. I think at the core of it, and I'm one that was guilty of it even early in my career, where we were making everything sticky and we were really excited about this. We're optimists. A lot of us are optimistic. And so I think occasionally that optimism blinds us a little bit to the outcomes, because if we see that we can develop, like, AI has incredible opportunities, especially if you look at in evening the playing field for people. So enabling people to have a source of knowledge to go to, right? I mean, if you think about there's a source of knowledge. Let's think about the optimistic view. There is this place where I can go that has this unlimited source of knowledge, and it can help me. It can help me learn about things. That's super exciting. And if you're like me, I'm a big Star Trek fan, and in the Star Trek universe, that's a good thing. You have Lieutenant Commander Data is like a beloved character, and that's AI. And so you go in with this optimism of, I want to create Lieutenant Commander Data. And meanwhile, you're not noticing that you're creating Skynet, right? That you're not noticing that you're actually creating the AI that wants to kill us. So
I love your examples. I love it.
Yeah. So it is, I think that's a big piece of it, is that we're optimistic by nature. And so we have to come in and short circuit that a little bit. And so I will tell you, there was something that I read last week, an article by Matthew Stevens on Medium, where he talks about, there's an exercise that he does with his design teams, and he calls it the Black Mirror exercise. So I'm not sure, I know you've got a global audience, so I don't know if everybody is familiar with Black Mirror, but Netflix has a series called Black Mirror that really takes current technological trends and imagines sort of the worst case scenario with them. So it's a little bit like the Twilight Zone. It's a little bit sci-fi, but it will show you very intentionally what happens when good ideas go wrong. And the Black Mirror exercise he does with his creative teams is, once they get through that ideate phase where they've come up with the innovative ideas that they want to take forward, he asks each of them to write a Black Mirror script. So imagine that you've been hired to write a dystopian, futuristic sci-fi script where your technology that you're developing is at the center of it. What are all the things that go wrong? What are all the bad things that happen? And it forces them to be like, okay, and I've developed this thing. It's awesome. It's going to help people. Now let me put that aside and just focus for a little while on, how could this hurt somebody? How could this do something bad?
I was fascinated by a couple of your blog posts that was talking about the normalization of exploitation.
Yes.
And I have a few questions around that topic. There are many examples of businesses and organizations being called out for their unethical behavior, and you just mentioned a couple of ones. Could you unpack for us the characteristics of an organization that normalizes exploitation?
Yeah, so what I would say is that if you are interviewing for a job and you're looking for a job, always ask, what are the success metrics for your role? So how is success measured for your role? Because if you look at from the most ethical to the most unethical companies out there, The unethical things that happen are typically tied to some kind of business metric. So if you look at, this is outside of design, but if you look at, and I'm not sure if it was global, but in the US, there was a big Wells Fargo banking scandal where they were opening bank accounts for people without telling them, like fraudulently opening bank accounts. And when it got traced back, there were such unrealistic sales targets set for the salespeople that salespeople who wanted to keep their job felt like they had no choice. So that's a very extreme example, but that can show you that whenever I see an organization where exploitation and unethical, like dark patterns, are predominant, it is because of metrics that people are driven towards. And that you'll see these people, they're like hostages. They need the job. They don't want to do this. But if their job depends on stickiness, if it depends on return clicks, if it depends on the really short-term metrics and not the longer-term metrics, chances are you are going to be put in ethically questionable situations repeatedly. So you want to talk to the company about what does success look like for them. And if success is, if you think about companies like Patagonia, and their brand promise. I know you have an international audience, so I'm trying to make sure I'm picking brands that people are familiar with. But it is those responsible brands that if they talk about their vision and their aspiration, it's always going to be focused on their customers and their people. We want to enable people to experience the outdoors. We want to do all of this. If the metrics they hit you with is we got to make money, we're a third round startup and we've got to actually turn a profit, or if it's all like every company has to make business, has to make money. So it's okay if they've got profit targets. But if those are the only targets that they're talking to you about as a designer, it's a huge red flag, because it means they are always going to prioritize profit over ethical and responsible design at the end of the day, even the most well-meaning people, because they need a job. And so that is just, I think designers forget to ask some of these questions. They're questions that a salesperson would ask and a designer forgets to ask.
Sure.
Right. The designer's worried about, and the company's going to tell you we love work-life balance. And, there's other red flags too. And one of them is the work-life balance red flag. Now, every company's going to tell you they have it, but you can sort of read between the lines, because if they don't value work-life balance, it means they don't have a problem exploiting you. If they don't have a problem exploiting you, they probably don't have a problem exploiting their customers. So I remember there was an agency that had an ad out, and it was like, we are a fast-paced, high-powered playground by night and by day and a fun club at night. And I'm like, so I'm never going home? I'm going to be there day and night, right? And then if it's like a fast-paced playground, I'm like, oh, that just doesn't, it does not sound good. So you need to have your senses attuned to that sort of thing, because if they're going to exploit you, they're going to exploit other people.
It has been said that many designers are introverts or have introverted traits. And as an introvert, how do you effectively make your case when design ethics are called into question?
So the first thing I will say, and most people don't believe me when I say this, but I am an introvert. I'm definitely an introvert. They don't think that because I'm standing in front of people, talking, teaching. But two things. One, I'm probably going to have to recharge my battery after this for the rest of the night, even as easy as this conversation is. And I think of those situations are quite different to me than a one-on-one situation. So that is the first thing, is that I need, for me to come out of my shell and push past the uncomfortableness that I feel. One is I have to really care about the topic that I'm talking about. Like if I've been sent before to conferences or whatever to talk to people about something that I don't really care about, and I just want to, crawl in the corner. I'm like, suddenly I'm a nerdy 12-year-old with braces that nobody wants to talk to. Like it's very uncomfortable. But if I really care about the topic, I make it about the topic and not me. And I think that is one of the first things for introverts, because when I'm putting myself out there, you're putting yourself out there. And so there is this, I don't want to, there's this idea of, I don't want people judging me. I don't want people looking at me. I don't naturally want to engage. I'm more comfortable observing. But if you can take it out of yourself and put it onto the thing that you really care about, it makes it easier. The other thing is preparation is your armor. So be more prepared than anyone else. So if you are a designer and you're sort of naturally an introvert, and you come upon one of these situations and you now have to go push back on something, if it's your opinion, it's going to feel worse for you, and it's going to make it much harder to make the case. But if you can pull all of the data for, it's not just my opinion, here's why we need to do it this way, and rely on that data and be prepared, then when you're standing up in the room and talking, it's not you talking, it's the data talking. And I will say this is not just for ethical conversations. I think the biggest disservice that designers do to their own careers is fear of speaking and fear of presenting, and you have to overcome it. Any way that you can. Practice makes perfect. Do it in a safe environment. When I teach, one of the things that I teach at Rutgers is sort of a UX boot camp, where it's a week where we give students an RFP. We teach them what contextual inquiry is, and then we send them out to do contextual inquiry same day. So it's like you have a business challenge, and at the end of the week, they will have gone through contextual inquiry, personas, journey maps, all the way to ideating a solution. They have to pitch that solution to a panel at the end of the week, and we put the students in teams. Every student on the team has to be a speaking part of that pitch. And every year we get students coming to us. I'm an introvert. I can't stand up in front of people. And it will be such not just a career limiter if you don't overcome that, but you will forever be doing designs that you don't think are the right designs, because you didn't learn how to appropriately build the case and present your design for why is it right. So I would say it is be prepared, pull the data together. And I don't want to say just overcome the fear, because it's really hard. And I get stage fright even now before I go out, but you have to take it outside of your own head and put it into, what's the point I'm trying to make? What's at stake with the point that I'm trying to make? Do I have all of the data? And just go out and present that. But it also, again, is practice presenting. If you're very nervous and there's something you want to really push back on, get your friend or a coworker or somebody, present that to them and get a little bit more comfortable with it. But it's something that you have to overcome if you want to make sure that you are doing the designs that you want to be doing, that are the right designs to be doing.
It's known that women in working environments experience more difficulties compared with men. And I can imagine that this even speaks louder when it comes to questioning ethical issues. Do gender dynamics influence how men and women approach ethical challenges in design?
So that's interesting, because it's a sort of no and yes. So what I have seen is it is less about how different genders approach ethics and more about how our actions are received. So what that means is that women need to approach ethics a little bit differently than men, even though from a mindset perspective, they are coming at it from sort of the same angle. And I've got many partners in crime who help me push ethical causes. It's men, it's women. I don't see a division along gender lines of people who care about this and want to talk about it. But when you get into a room, it's still a fact. And I spent 25 years as a female in working for a Japanese tech company, which was a very progressive and modern company, but just being in tech, even with the clients, I'm often the only woman in the room. I'm often the first, earlier in my career, I was often the first time anybody even had a woman in the room when we were having these conversations. It was sort of very surreal. And it is true that women, it's happening less and less, but they get interrupted, they get dismissed, especially when discussing a topic that could be perceived as an emotional topic. And often, even now, even in really progressive workplaces where you're not seeing the sort of microaggressions, there is still a societal perception that when men show emotion, they're being passionate. They're passionately pleading their case. And a woman, it's often viewed as they're being too emotional. And so I think it's twofold. One is the male allies in the room helping to like clear the way for you, but it's also, and I always hate to put it on the individual, but for women going and present, what I had to learn was a couple of things. One is that I can be passionate, but it has to be based on logic and data. The argument has to be very logical and very data. Like I can't go in and say my gut says this isn't good, and how can you? It might be perceived as being a little bit too emotional. So you really focus on that data. And then the other thing I kind of learned around some of the microaggression stuff. So it's a little trick. So first of all, you have to not worry about whether or not people think that you're overly aggressive. And I'm not. Don't be a jerk. Like don't be overly aggressive, but I found early in meetings that I would start to say an idea and then somebody would just talk over me. I just kept talking, and then both of us were talking, and it would get really uncomfortable, like really awkward, because there's two people talking and neither one of them is stopping. And one day I was just like, I'm just going to keep going until that person stops. And they did. So it is also, don't accept being interrupted or dismissed. You have to kind of push through it. But the reality is, look, I think for male or female, logic-based arguments on why doing something a certain way is either right or wrong is always going to win. But for women, I think it's even more important because of how it's perceived. If it's in a soft, emotional gray area, it's often perceived a very different way. So it's unfortunate, but it's true.
Lisa Woodley, thank you for your time today.
But thank you. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
But before we go,
yes,
are there 3 books that you would recommend to our listeners?
Oh, absolutely. And some are more hot off the presses than others. So I would say the first one, the book that set me on this path, is a book called Ruined by Design by Mike Monteiro. That is an absolute must read because Mike articulated what I had been feeling, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And so I think that's a really important one because it is a lot more even radical than my writing, right? So
and he has a certain way of communicating, right?
Absolutely. Like it is, we need to clean our mess. Like designers, you made this mess, clean it up, right? And I loved that. I responded to that. Because, like I said, I had been feeling all of these things, and I'm like, am I the only one? And then I was complaining to somebody, and they're like, oh, you have to read this book. So I would highly recommend Ruined by Design by Mike Monteiro. The other one, not a well-known one, but it is a friend and colleague of mine. It's a co-instructor at Rutgers, has a book called Digital Outcasts, and his name's Kel Smith. So Kel Smith wrote Digital Outcasts, which ties ethics directly to inclusivity. So it is really about looking at people who are being left behind and how do we as designers account for them and incorporate them into what we're doing. And the thing I love about what Kel does is he really shows how inclusive design is often just good design too. That it's not inclusive, you're being inclusive of a group and therefore excluding quote unquote normal users. It's that it is more inclusive for everyone. The one note about Kel's book, he's got the new edition coming out next year, so it's up to you. But that one is a really good one because I think a lot of times we forget about inclusivity. Then the last one is the book Unmasking AI by Joy Bolamwini. So that is not a design book. So Joy Bolamwini is at the time when she wrote the book, she was in the MIT program, and she had sort of come across some inherent bias in things like facial recognition, and it really set her on a path. And she is now Dr. Joy Bolamwini, and she founded the Algorithmic Justice League, and they do a lot of work looking at specific around data and AI and ethics. So while it's not design, it really does a great job of opening your eyes to where those biases are. And I'm going to give you one more bonus that's not a book. If in your region you have Netflix, look for a documentary called Coded Bias. And that documentary is about Dr. Bolamwini and what she did in order to found this. And so it's if you don't want to jump into reading a book about AI, that's a really good documentary, but it covers a lot about ethics. So I would say those are the three books that if there's nothing else you look at, those are really good ones. And then read. There's just so on Medium and online, there's so many people talking about this.
And before you go, can you mention again the name of your platform, the URL? Where can I find it?
So it's on Medium, so you can go to Medium. It's not behind a paywall because I'm not trying to make money off of this. I want people to learn about it. So it's on Medium. It's Lisa Woodley. Right now it's the Designer's Resistance Toolkit is the tool there. It's 10 tools in that toolkit that cover everything from sort of initial pushback all the way through to if you decide it's time to leave. I haven't named the next series, but that last tool inspired a new series around sort of maintaining psychological safety in a challenging work environment. So there's that as well. But the Designer's Resistance Toolkit you can get from Medium, and it's free to read.
Thank you so much. And for our listeners, if you have any questions, please leave a message. And that's it for today. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. I really enjoyed this.